As I think back over the last year and over the last 5 years, I think that I would have to say that photography has saved my life, which sounds really dramatic and funny, but I think it kind of has. And there was a shift that happened. I'd always been interested in photography myself, and my husband had as well. And then there was a shift that happened for me around the time that I made a big work change, about the time that I stopped working in San Francisco. I started becoming more involved in photography. I was beginning to take images and find images that meant something to me really deeply emotionally, and that was really amazing to allow myself to feel that way. But as we began to show our work, it meant that I could show these images, and I could speak about my experience visually.
Stephanie was a very young girl when her sexual abuse began. She grew up in Australia as an only child.
I've called my growing up the experience of the day world and the night world. And the day world was in reality great. My father was a doctor. He was a psychiatrist. He was very well respected. We had a lovely home. I went to good schools. I was good at school. I had friends. We traveled. It all really was excellent. On the surface, no one would ever know that there was anything else going on. But in addition to the day world, there was the night world. And the night world is the part that I've kept a secret. And the events of the night world started probably when I was around 6 or so. I have a photograph of myself. It's a picture of me as a little girl with a koala, and I love the photograph. I'm holding a koala. It's kind of the thing you do in Australia. You get your picture taken at this sanctuary place holding a koala. So it's a very sweet picture of myself, and I don't know, I had to be maybe 5 or so, and when I look at it, I think this is the last time I was clean. My father had said very early on that if I told anybody, no one would believe me. And he was a psychiatrist. He was well placed in the community. He had power in the community. And I absolutely knew that no one would believe me. I knew what he said was correct. And I also felt that they would not only not believe me, but that I would be blamed as well. And so there was just no question that I wasn't going to speak about it.
Stephanie was 16 when she came to the United States and stayed as a long-term guest in a large family home. For the first time, she was exposed to a healthy and safe family with a father who showed respect and boundaries. This experience empowered Stephanie to put an end to her long-term abuse. Among the many life-changing and positive experiences Stephanie had while far away from home as a teenager, Stephanie also met her life partner.
And I met Frank, the man who was to become my husband, who's still my husband, who's still the love of my life. I met him here too. And so when I left here after 6 months, I felt that this was a place that I could be safe, and it was a place that I needed to somehow get back to.
Now, over 30 years happily married, Stephanie and Frank share a solidly rooted partnership based on love, honesty, openness, and hard work.
And so when I began to think, all right, it's time to try and work out more about the sexual abuse, I thought, well, perhaps photography can be part of this. My first thought was that I had a series of intrusive images that kept coming back. They continued to torment me. I had talked about them. I had written about them. And yet they still came up. And so my thought was, well, if somehow I can use photography to grapple with these images, perhaps I can work them through in that way. When Frank and I both met Gary, do you know how sometimes you meet someone and you just feel connected with them? And I have to say, when I met him, I felt the same way that I did when I met Frank, which is that this is a good, solid, kind man. And I don't think I would have gone through this process. I know I could not have gone through this process if I hadn't had that feeling.
In early 2014, Stephanie and Gary set out on a journey to photographically release the images that had for so long been captured in Stephanie's memory.
Gary would give me the images, and I would usually load them onto my computer, and I didn't want to do that initially, but I couldn't sleep, and so I did load them up. And I had it was the most extraordinary experience, because these images came up and I looked at them. And you know, when I've had these memories, when I've gone back to this experience, when I've thought about this, I've always felt so ashamed. This has been the image that has been so full of shame for me. And I looked at these photographs and I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel shame. I was horrified. And I was sad. But for the first time, I could see this wasn't what I wanted. This wasn't what I wanted. This wasn't what I asked for. This was not my responsibility. I mean, it was so clear. And I sent him an email immediately saying, you know, it doesn't matter if anybody else ever sees these. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. I'm finally clear about this.
As so many of us as survivors do, Stephanie has had to deeply explore issues of shame, guilt, and responsibility around her experiences.
I do think it comes back to those messages that you get about it being your fault if you look a certain way. And so through this whole process, one of the things I wrote at one point is, well, can I be beautiful? I mean, can that be okay? Can I experience myself in that way instead of experiencing myself as being damaged, or experience thinking that being beautiful or being pretty is a bad and dangerous thing? I spent many years wearing clothes that were a size too big. You know, you watch those television shows, what not to wear. Well, you know, I realized there have been periods where I would have been that before one in the three-way mirror with the skirt that was way too long and the top that was way too big, and that actually is starting to shift for me. I have to say, Tim Gunn, I love you. Tim Gunn, I love you.
Stephanie had a long and fruitful career as a psychologist and teacher, working with people who have experienced trauma in their own lives, all the while keeping her own story deeply buried. Now, supported by community, compassion, and an increase in confidence in herself, Stephanie is finding her own voice and her ability to express as a means towards healing.
And I will have to say that if you had asked me while I was teaching, well, does this have anything to do with your history? I'd have said, no, I don't think so. So what I would say is that the experiences that probably led me to psychology in the first place, and the experiences that led me to the kind of work I've done as a psychologist, have been the things that I've never spoken about. They've been the secrets that I've kept. And now I find that it's time to speak about those things. I'm more and more feeling not only can I speak, but that I should speak, and that I must speak. Unless those of us who have experienced it are willing to speak, it becomes just an intellectual thing for people. You know, it's always been helpful for me to watch other people speak of their experience. It's been so reassuring. And so my hope would be, you know, that if anybody else could have that would be a good thing. And my hope would also be if somebody who hadn't had this experience could understand a little more about what it's like to go through it, then perhaps that would be even better.
Stephanie's strength and powerful voice come through in all of her personal and professional endeavors. Her kindness and compassion shine brightly. We are honored to have connected with Stephanie and to have become part of her ongoing journey.